Hello and welcome to another episode of SacTown Talks. Today we have a special guest joining us, Assemblymember Al Muratsuchi from the 66th Assembly District joining us. Assemblymember, how's it going? Thanks for joining the program.
Good. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Glad to have you on. Obviously, you guys just went into, a summer recess. Before you guys went into break, there was some interesting developments dealing with, COVID cases showing up in the assembly among staff. And today we learned that one member has been tested. Can you kind of, describe, how, the last week of session has been going and kind of, the precautions that were taken and how you're feeling today, knowing that there was a bit of an outbreak going on in the assembly.
Yeah, well, obviously, this pandemic continues to turn our lives upside down, our whole world upside down. And, I represent the South Bay area of Los Angeles County, which has become, unfortunately, one of the hotspots, not only in the country, but in the whole world. And so, we're closely watching, we're doing everything we can, of course, trying to stay home as much as possible, wearing masks, washing our hands and so forth. But to hear that the virus is making inroads into the state capital community is, of course, it's a tough time for all of us. But my thoughts and prayers are going out to those that have tested positive. Make sure that I'm hoping that they will be one of the, what I understand to be most people, get through with the COVID-19 with relatively mild symptoms. But I'm hoping that they recover strong and well.
Being in the South, Bay Area of LA, there's been a lot of talk about, closing beaches and kind of a lot of worry about 4th of July. Can you kind of tell us, how the 4th of July weekend went in your area and whether you think there will be concerns about a bigger spike going into the following weeks?
Yeah. So, COVID-19 was on all of our minds as the governor announced the walking back of many of the provisions to reopen the economy. Our local bars, indoor dining, that has been tough on many of our small businesses. But again, LA County, our numbers, our hospitalization numbers, our ICU numbers, they're clearly spiking in the last 2 to 3 weeks. So when LA County announced that they were going to be closing the beaches, it's tough on me. I'm a surfer. I love taking my family to the beach. I'm less than 10 minutes away from Torrance Beach here in Los Angeles County, and so it was tough. I'm actually going back out, taking my family this afternoon, maybe to try to catch some evening waves. But it's a tough time for all of us. We're all making sacrifices.
Hey, to kind of, step back and talk about your journey to the assembly. Can you kind of, walk us through how you got to become an assembly member?
Sure.
How you drew you to want to do this?
Okay. Well, I always joke that you got to be a little crazy to enter into the world of politics. But ever since my college days at Berkeley, I've had a passion for trying to change the world. I went to Berkeley in the 80s, and that's when I picked up the bug to want to change the world. I was a student activist at Berkeley during my undergraduate years. And from then I worked with a series of civil rights and other political organizations. I went to UCLA for law school before I started working on policy issues. Then while I was working with the State Attorney General's office as a Deputy Attorney General, I first ran for my first office, which was for my local school board, the Torrance School Board. I was elected to the Torrance School Board in 2005, served on my local school board for 7 years before an opportunity opened up for me to run for the State Assembly in 2012. And that's when I was elected to represent the South Bay in the state assembly in 2012. And ever since then, I've had a little bit more of a rocky road than many of my colleagues. I represent what a lot of people call a purple district. Back in 2012, especially, was a district that was almost evenly divided between Democrats and Republicans, with a big chunk of independents who declined to states. I won in 2012, but I lost my reelection in 2014 by less than a percentage point. It was a record low turnout year, but I was able to make my comeback in 2016, and I've had the privilege of representing the South Bay ever since.
I guess that setback, in 2014 when you lost after winning in 2012. What was it that made you want to come back and try again to see if you could come back?
Yeah, it's the same thing that has carried me ever since my college days. It's the passion for wanting to make a difference. I'm proud to be a Californian. I'm proud of all the work that California does, in leading the world, leading the country in so many different ways. The world's fifth largest economy, being national and global leaders in the fight against climate change. I mean, that's one of my big passions. And so I was convinced that when I narrowly lost my reelection in 2014, that it wasn't because I did anything wrong. I believe it was a reflection of the larger forces of low voter turnout and the partisan politics at the time. And ever since then, my numbers, my reelection numbers, have been getting stronger and stronger, and I think that's an indication that my constituents, the people of the South Bay, appreciate the work that I've been doing.
In early March, we were all forced into shelter in place and kind of had to adapt to a new normal of staying home and trying to kind of work from home. And I guess what did sheltering in place look for you, and how were you able to manage your responsibilities as an assembly member while not actually being able to go in the community?
That continues to be a real challenge. I mean, there's no business like politics that's more people oriented. It's all about the face to face, the handshakes, the back slaps, and all that. And it's all part of relationship building. And we've just had to operate in this new universe of these Zoom calls and Zoom interviews as we're doing now. But from the get-go, with the stay-at-home order being issued in March 19th, my first focus was to focus on the public health issues. I reached out to all of my local hospitals. We're fortunate to have a good number of hospitals and healthcare providers in my area in the South Bay of Los Angeles County. And so I was on the phone talking to public health officials, talking to our local hospital leaders, making sure that we were communicating in terms of the supply of the personal protective equipment, in terms of the number of beds available, what their surge capacity planning, how that was going. It was a real scary time. I mean, obviously we're still right in the thick of things. But we were watching the videos of what was happening on the East Coast in New York City and New Jersey and the other East Coast states, and so we had a direct preview, so to speak, in terms of what we wanted to avoid. And I think that that public health leadership combined with frankly the fear of the virus was probably more effective than anything else in terms of getting people to stay at home, to listen to the public health officials who were telling them that the best thing that we can do at that time was to stay at home as much as possible.
As a member of the API caucus, we've seen a lot of, anti-Asian kind of discrimination going on, and uptick in, Asian hate crimes. What is your experience, and what have you seen in the district on this issue, and your response to this? Crime.
Yeah. So as you are raising this issue, I mean, there was a report that just came out last week by an organization, Stop AAPI Hate, they've been compiling the reports of these anti-Asian hate crimes, these physical and verbal assaults being directed against Asian Americans, not only in California but throughout the country. And this is a reflection of the many people that are targeting Asians. They're blaming Asians for this coronavirus. They're saying things like you guys brought the virus over to the country, and then they're trying to blame Chinese immigrants, and as an extension to all Asian Americans. For a lot of people, they can't tell the difference between a Chinese and a Japanese or any other Asian American. And so we've seen a spike, over 2,000 incidents of reported anti-Asian incidents in the past 3 months. And unfortunately, we've seen some of that activity right here in my own backyard in a community like Torrance. Torrance is it's a pretty quiet suburb of about 150,000 people. We pride ourselves on being so quiet that a lot of people call Torrance Borrance, with a B for being so boring. Right. But we've been far from being boring lately. Torrance has been in the national news in recent weeks when there was a series of anti-Asian activity that was captured on video and that went viral on social media. There was one woman in particular, a woman who has subsequently been arrested and charged with a battery charge. But she was captured on at least two different videos that went viral where she's talking to one young Filipino American woman that was working out in one of our local parks. Go back to whatever effing Asian country you belong. And after that, she accosted a 42-year-old Asian American father that was there with his 11-year-old son, calling him Chinaman. You need to go home. How many people can't stand you being here. And from all this investigation, we find out that she was involved in yet a third incident just a few months ago in late 2019, where, again, an incident involving a Filipino-American woman at the Delama Mall, one of the biggest malls on the West Coast in the city of Torrance. So, that kind of news, it's not reflective of the great community that Torrance is. I lived in Torrance for over 20 years. I was on the Torrance School Board. It's a racially diverse community. More than a third of Torrance residents are Asian American. And so, I think this is just an example of some of the bad apples out there that are unfortunately feeling emboldened by, I have to say it. I don't want to sound too partisan, but, it starts with the top. The president of the United States has been, making a series of divisive, inflammatory remarks, against racial minorities and including Asian Americans. He's been talking about this coronavirus being the Kung flu. He's the Wuhan virus. I think it's only adding fuel to the fire of this pandemic of hate that we're seeing all across the country. That unfortunately includes these anti-Asian hate crimes and hate activities that we've seen in recent months.
Yeah, I know when the pandemic first started, Asian American businesses were extremely hit hard. I guess, have you talked to any of your local API-owned businesses to see if that's still the case, or if I guess business is returning? Obviously, the shutdown recently is going to affect things, but are people returning as normal as possible?
Sure. So, my communities, my district, they're primarily suburban districts. So we don't have like a Chinatown or a large immigrant business community that's kind of like focused. So I've only heard from other parts of California, like the San Francisco Chinatown. I was talking with my colleague from San Francisco, Assemblymember David Chu, last week, and he was talking about how businesses have dramatically dropped in the San Francisco Chinatown area. Here in the South Bay, I haven't heard those type of reports, but I should mention that there was a fourth anti-Asian hate incident that involved a local business, a small business that sells Japanese cookware, and they received a threatening letter that was posted on the front door of their business that threatened to bomb them. We're going to bomb you, your store, if you don't listen. We know where you live. Go back to Japan, you monkey. Wow. Again, this pandemic of hate. It's not just been directed against individual residents, but it's also been directed at some of our businesses.
California, I guess, has a unique history, with, I guess, API businesses and, going back, 150 years since statehood, the Chinese Exclusion Act, Japanese internment, I guess the state found, I guess, reparations or a way to, I guess, deal with these issues in the past. We thought, a lot of these were behind us, but kind of this pandemic, I guess, has brought out the worst in a lot of us, as you've seen, not only amongst against the API community, but we've also seen a lot dealing with the Black community and Black Lives Matter, and kind of a lot of, I guess, racial discourse going on right now. Kind of, I guess, what are you looking at from a legislative, I guess, level, and kind of helping, I guess, deal with these issues going on in the future?
Yeah, clearly, what's been on the mind, on my mind, and the minds of my colleagues in the state legislature, are two main things. One is the coronavirus, and two is all the racial and social inequities that the coronavirus has highlighted, specifically along the lines of race. We've clearly continued to get more and more evidence of how the coronavirus has impacted Black and Brown communities more than any other community. And, it's a reflection of, the systemic racism, the systemic inequities in our society and in our country that is manifesting itself in so many different ways, whether we're talking about jobs, education, healthcare, so these two dynamics, the coronavirus and the racial divides that exist in our country, are clearly providing the lens, through which we are seeing so many different issues. For example, I have a bill, AB 345, that is trying to, establish, trying to minimize the amount of oil drilling taking place in the backyards of primarily Black and Brown communities. It's a top priority environmental justice issue. And I think that's one of many ways in which this environmental justice is showing, how systemic racism manifests itself in so many different ways, including where oil drilling takes place in the state of California. So, I think, on a broad range of policy areas, policy issues, we're seeing the dynamics of the coronavirus and the racial divide that we see in our own beautiful state of California being raised in so many different issues.
I guess in March, when the legislature shut down and you guys were beginning to return back around May, you guys were told to kind of pare back your bill packages. Kind of, I guess, what does your bill package look like today in comparison to how it looked like in March?
Yeah, no, it definitely, we've had to drop some of our most, ambitious bills, the bills that we were feeling the most passionate about. I had a bill, AB 39, that was trying to significantly increase funding for our K through 12 schools. And this is a 2-year bill that we've been working on, before the pandemic hit, when we still had a budget surplus with a $16 billion reserve in our rainy day fund. but clearly, I mean, again, this pandemic has turned the state budget upside down. I mean, we went from a record surplus to a $54 billion deficit. We're talking more about what programs to save rather than what programs to expand. So that has definitely been, a difficult transition to make. But clearly, we're all there. There's so many people that are suffering, they're hurting out there, and we're just trying to focus on how can we best help all the people who are hurting right now.
No, definitely. Kind of interesting, you were talking about your experience on the Torrance school board.
Mm-hmm.
Every parent is wondering, are we going to be able to send our kids back to school in the fall?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of, I guess, what's your thoughts on this issue of, is it going to be safe to go to school in the fall, and kind of what, steps are being done to, get us to be able to safely take our children back to school?
Yeah, no, that's a real personal issue for me. I mean, my wife and I mean, we have a daughter that's going to be going into middle school, and we're following the discussions being held by our school district and our school board closely as they're making plans for how to reopen schools in the fall. Like a lot of parents, we're worried about how safe our daughter's going to be, how all of our kids in the South Bay are going to be. And yet at the same time, we recognize that there's so much learning loss taking place, that there's so many kids that are backsliding in terms of their education because of this COVID-19 distance learning reality. So, it's I'm following those discussions very closely in terms of how we can, whether it's through some hybrid model of, staggering the times that kids are in the classroom combined with some level of distance learning. I think that is one of the biggest challenges facing, my local school district as well as all school districts throughout the country.
One thing you brought up is the distance learning, and I know different experiences across the state on that. Not everyone has access to broadband or access to, equipment to distance learn. I guess in your district, were a majority of schools able to provide distance learning, or was that not feasible?
Mm-hmm. So my district, I cover almost the entire representative span of socioeconomic challenges. On the east side of my district is Los Angeles Unified, where about 85% of their students fall into one of the disadvantaged student categories, low income English language learners or foster kids. Almost 85%, more than 85% of LAUSD kids fall into one of those three categories. But on the other end, on the west side of my district, I have districts like Manhattan Beach and Hermosa Beach. Some of the most affluent communities in the state, where they have a much smaller population. About 5% of their population falls into one of those disadvantaged student categories. So, I'm working hard to try to close that digital divide. I've actually been working on a broadband and distance learning bond, so that we not only make sure that we have the broadband infrastructure, the internet speed that's necessary for all kids to be able to make distance learning work, at least from a technological perspective, as well as to make sure that all districts have the devices that they need. So this broadband bond that we've been talking about, where we're trying to make sure that there's enough funding for all school districts to be able to provide the devices that they need to make sure that every child is not at a disadvantage because of these technological needs that we're facing in this new distance learning reality.
Yeah. Currently, I guess the legislature is in recess. In a normal year, you'd have about a month off back in the district, but I guess this year you have 2 weeks barring changes.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, how are you spending these next 2 weeks? I guess in the district.
Mm-hmm. Well, number one, I always emphasize to people that we're not on vacation. I mean, we're just back home working hard from our usually from our district offices, but now a lot of it is spending my time on these Zoom calls from home, which is where I'm at right now. We're still working hard, trying to help people. I mean, there's just so much suffering going on now. So many people that are hurting from this pandemic and from the economic fallout that has been caused by this pandemic. It's definitely not a time for us to be, lounging and vacationing.
Yeah, hard to get on a vacation these days. It just seems so unreal that just when we thought we were about to open our economy up and get back to normal, and then kind of things have set back a bit. I understand you're a bit of a baseball fan, and there's talk about baseball getting back to normal and possibly coming back. I guess, have you been following that at all? And do you think we're going to see a baseball season here later this year?
Yeah, well, talk about one of many heartbreaks. I mean, you're from, I assume you're from Sacramento, so you're probably a Giants fan. But this is supposed to be, the year that the Dodgers finally bring home the World Series championship. Especially with Mookie Betts joining the squad. What's the point of bringing Mookie Betts to the Dodgers if we can't watch him play in Dodger blue, right?
Right.
I just saw the news that David Price, the number 3 pitcher in the rotation, saying that he doesn't want to play this year because of the coronavirus. I mean, it's a tough time for all of us, including Dodgers fans.
Yeah, especially Dodgers fans. Just after the news of the Houston Astros stealing 2 World Series from you, and then I even forgot about Mookie Betts. That's not crazy to see.
That's right. Don't get me started on the Astros. Yeah.
Oh man. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
All right.
Do you have any imparting wisdom for us before we go?
Just wishing all the viewers of this show to stay safe. I mean, I know it's a crazy time, but I know whenever people ask me how I'm doing, my response is always the same. I count my blessings. I try to focus on the positive. I try to focus on how my family, myself, as far as I can tell, we're healthy, and but at the same time, we recognize that there are a lot of people that are suffering, a lot of people that are hurting, and that's why we need to keep working hard to make sure that we take care of folks who are struggling.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and hope
to
talk to you again. Thank you.
Okay, take care.
Some are called dreamers.